Hello and welcome to the Safety Brief. I'm your host Elizabeth, and today we're diving into a modern privacy threat hiding in plain sight. AI meeting note takers. They show up quietly in your Zoom or team calls, take perfect notes, and then vanish without a trace. But under the surface, these tools may be doing a lot more than just helping you remember who said what. We have Mike and Matt here to help us break this down today. Thank you both for being here and sharing your knowledge.
Yeah, most definitely. It's gonna be a fun one.
All right, so let's unpack it. To start us off, what are AI meeting note takers and why are they becoming so common?
Well, I mean, obviously a little self-explanatory as far as what makes them so appealing. And to put a name to some of these, you got Teams. Microsoft Teams has their very own AI, meeting summary and transcription service. Otter AI is a pretty common one that I've seen out there on a lot of calls and a lot of waiting rooms. But ultimately, what they claim and what they kind of deliver on as far as a value prop is they will be able to keep track of the conversations, keep track of emotional inflections and kind of tone, so much so that they can give you a pretty accurate meeting summary. And people are seeing that as a metaphorical scribe, a minutes taker. Who's responsible for meeting minutes today? I mean, even just I'd say 2 or 3 years ago, uh, within our cybersecurity operations department, we had an engineer, just hey, take meeting notes, copy down deliverables, pass it on to the team, spread the love, make sure everybody's aware, and pass it to the evening shift. And so the value add is obvious and it's appealing, but I think the reason they're becoming so common is also a little bit of the wow factor. For the same reason that we've seen uh, open AI, chat GPTs, and other um, AI bots, chat bots, and so they're cool. They have a novelty for sure, but the immediate appeal is primarily the efficiency you gain back from being able to keep track of many meetings that you normally wouldn't have time to sit down and make notes on after the fact.
Yeah, thank you for that, Mike. Now here's where things get a little tricky in my opinion. How can someone joining someone else's meeting accidentally give these AI bots access to your account? So say you never initiated that, but just by joining a colleague's meeting, you now have an AI bot joining all of your future meetings.
Right. Where we've seen this primarily be common is during the setup of these note-taking apps or bots or whatever you want to name them. The utility requires a level of permission to auto join as a participant. They show up in the participants list and the attendee list as a unique person, right? This is where it starts. It gets weird. But they use the permission tied to your account. So when you go and enroll, you have to authorize access to uh, this utility in order to join a meeting, and it's often driven off of the calendar, your Outlook calendar, your Google calendar.
hmm
And so the danger is really in order for that utility, platform, bot, whatever, to join the meeting, you're giving it explicit access almost to impersonate from a role-based access perspective your very own account. And so where it gets tricky, and we'll talk about this, so I'm not getting ahead of ourselves, is are we okay with that? Number one. Number two, if we're okay with it from an ethics perspective, number two, is it secure or is it wise? Right. And so again, ethics being, are we okay from a good or bad moral standpoint of doing this? And then second, is it secure? Is it a good idea from a security aspect? So I think those are the primary two themes we're going to see today: is what is ethically correct or ethically right, and then, you know, secure from a more business operational perspective. And but yeah, I think that's one of the things people maybe don't realize. They check the T's and C's, everybody hits next, next, done, right, on those forms. But the difficulty primarily being they need to access these meetings and audio and in some cases visual somehow.
Yeah, thank you for that, Mike. Anything from you, Matt, on that subject?
No, I'll have more as we get deeper in.
Alrighty. I'm glad that you brought that up though, Mike. It's something that we say a lot here on the safety brief, and that's reading agreements before you agree, knowing what you're agreeing to and what information you're willing to share. So thank you
Right.
for that. Now let's talk risk. What are the biggest security and privacy concerns tied to these tools?
Yeah, just stemming off the previous point, I think the so both sides, right? Security and privacy. So security, primarily implying that are we opening ourselves up to more risk from a, you know, how secure is our environment when using one of these tools versus unsecure? And it's going to come in two forms. The security of, hey, this access, this permission we're giving this platform very often has to be stored somewhere, right? That connection or that authentication, that token, if you will, has to be stored somewhere. And so the question primarily being on a security aspect of it, uh, how are these tools, some of them free, mind you, securing that token, securing that access? But the other side of the house, and this is where it gets really, really interesting really quick, is the privacy of number one. It is one thing for me as an individual, Mike Hornsby, to have privilege or access or a classification from a security clearance standpoint to be able to access some form of information, right? So if I go through a background check or if I go through a military clearance or some form of security clearance, there is a tangible process for me to be background checked and for me to be monitored in order to maintain that clearance. The difficulty is that uh, there is no person, right? It is a company, it is a data center, it is a tool or a platform, often stored in a cloud and not self-hosted. And I think there's benefits, right? There's a lot of, I think, uh, themes and patterns kind of emerging with even LLMs and chatbots being locally or self-hosted for the sake of, hey, I know where this data is going, I know where it's residing, and thus I can secure it. Yes, I think there's merit in that, but I think the difficulty here is that we have, number one, very little control over the access piece once we grant it, and then very little control over the where does the data go and what is done with it. And very commonly, especially if the tool is free, you can almost guarantee it, that usage and the data therein is being used to train and make that product better. And so, in exchange for the value proposition of you get a summary of notes delivered to you in your email, that's great. Um, you're handing over all of that data, and depending on the conversation, depending on the content of meetings, that could be scary. That could be
Yeah.
scary.
Yeah, and that goes into something that, again, we've brought up on the safety brief as well, is that nothing is free. The cost of free applications is your data. And in these cases, data leakage is the biggest issue. Recorded conversations may contain credentials, confidential plans, or personal information. Not all services offer that end-to-end encryption or store data in secure, compliant environments, like Mike was saying. Which brings up a serious concern. Can these AI note takers collect HIPAA protected or sensitive data without proper consent?
Yes, they are not confined to what they can or cannot actually gather from a meeting. Anything you say, anything that is shown, anything that is included in part of the meeting is fair game for them to leverage and archive, which is why you should not be using anything like that if you are involved in any kind of a requirement to uphold HIPAA regulations or really any kind of, you know, personally identifiable information or GDPR. You cannot have any of those kinds of things. So, yeah, it's never a good situation.
Yeah, Mike, I think you had a article you wanted to highlight for this topic in particular.
We certainly can. Let me go ahead and pull that up now.
For any of our audio only listeners or podcast listeners, we will have the link to this article in the description.
Yeah, so there's a pretty good blog post here from, I think it's Fordham University, and mainly what they posted this for was to kind of as a PSA to their own their own students, their own faculty and staff and whatnot. But basically, they were publishing that there is a etiquette and consideration for using AI note-taking recording tools, specifically applying to Zoom and Microsoft Teams. The tools that they specifically cite were Otter, which we had mentioned, Fireflies, and Copilot, Microsoft Copilot. So Microsoft, you're not off the hook here. There's absolutely repercussions here for what's built into Teams. So there's two primary kind of, minefields you get into. One, which is really important and often underemphasized, is the consent nature needed before an individual or a company or a team is recorded. And so, if you ever go on a support call, you'll call into a whatever help desk, and often you're told, hey, calls may be monitored or recorded for quality purposes. They legally have to do that. Also, if you ever get a marketing text or a sales pitch text or anything from any form of somebody trying to sell you something, they are legally required to allow you to opt out. So if there is not an opt-out clause in that text, they're actually violating legislation as far as the FTC and everybody coming out on this as far as in consent and whatnot. So where does this come into realm with AI note-taking? Specifically, number one, in order to ethically use these, and this is why we're kind of having a conversation between ethics and security. Ethics primarily, you have to inform all participants before enabling these features explicitly. That's not a, hey, the tool may tell them, and this is where we often see this kind of passed around as quote unquote liability, is the tool notifies it, or even Teams, when you start it says meeting recording started, right? There are legal requirements in order for people to know if they're being recorded or not. They can't be recorded without their consent or their prior knowledge, and that's what it's emphasizing here. But also obtaining explicit consent, meaning a boilerplate is rapidly not becoming enough, right? Like, hey, you may be recorded. Hey, you may or may not be used in the learning or training of our model. But also, and this is the big piece, allowing participants to opt out. So imagine right now you walk into a meeting and you default have Otter.ai or Copilot transcribe every one of your meetings. Number one, you don't have explicit consent from all attendees and they have very, very clear path to opt out, you're in violation of a code of ethics as far as consent and being recorded. And I think that's one of the biggest pieces as far as ethics is concerned. While we don't want to stay there too long, it is important to point out that it is one thing to sit down and have a conversation with somebody. It is another to pull out your phone and start voice memos and record it. Like, people need to know that. And there's very serious laws in certain states around, can you record without consent? Can you, in what cases and whatnot? And so again, teeters on the end of surveillance, right? But the other piece is the data retention and storage risks. This is where the security aspect comes in as far as cybersecurity. And so being able to classify meeting data appropriately, and this is to exactly Matt's point, transcripts containing PII, or in this case, student data, or in our case, we work with a lot of cybersecurity incidents, IP addresses, locations, and things like that, right? This is privileged data that we have to be very, very conscious of where this data is going, how this is being stored, and where it's being stored. It's one thing if I walk up to Elizabeth and be like, hey, Elizabeth, don't tell anybody, but my password is this, right? It's a very trivial example. But the point is I'm explicitly sharing a piece of information from myself to Elizabeth. Why? Because I trust her to steward that information well. I have control over where that information goes, but once I hand it over to Elizabeth, it could go anywhere. Right? It is now, I'm at the mercy of how she stewards that information. Think of that, but now it's a company, and now we have no clue where the data is stored. We have no clue what kind of privacy guidelines are followed, primarily because you got to remember, some of these companies are based in the United States, some of them are not. And so they are at the mercy of their own local governing laws more often than some international FTC case, right? Trying to come for an international company that says, I am not an American company, I do not abide by these things, et cetera, right? And so again, there are ethics concerns to these note takers primarily, which I think is that doesn't get enough airtime. And obviously the security concerns saying, hey, once you enable that tool, once you give it the role-based access that it can join any meeting at any point, any time. I've even had it at some points. I've hopped on a Teams call and the meeting note taker attended, right? It was in there, but the actual individual that would schedule the appointment, they said they would be there, wasn't there. And the expectation was that the note taker would take it. And so now we're getting into some really crazy practices over, hey, what is number one, professional and good etiquette? Number two, what is ethically sound? And number three, what are we doing from a security posture about the risks? And so again, just some good guidelines I think that they give around classifying data appropriately. There will be some meetings where you don't even bring your phone into that boardroom, right? Like it is that critical of information. And the same with these note takers, but also looking at where are these transcripts stored, how long are they retained, what is done with the data after the fact, et cetera.
Thank you so much for that, Mike. And again, this article will be in the description as well for our audio-only listeners, so feel free to check that out on your own time as well. Something even creepier, in my opinion, is that I've seen where people don't opt in, which we talked about this a little bit earlier. They don't opt in knowingly, uh, just by, accepting an invite on their calendar, excuse me, and showing up to the Zoom call or Teams call, and there's a note taker. But after they leave that meeting and start another meeting with a different individual, that note taker sticks to their account because they gave them the permissions via the calendar. So, why is it so hard for users to disconnect once these AI note takers attach themselves to their accounts?
Because it's not their account that made the attachment. In
And,
many cases, what you're finding is a person that had the AI note taker or whatever the junk they're using is joining the meeting. And because the person was added to that meeting, they are now attached to them, not by their actual email, but by backend permissioning that states that it can join any meeting that is created underneath that organization at that point.
Yeah, I had a meeting with someone about a week ago actually, who had this issue, and the bot kept on joining their meetings, and the only solution that they've found so far is kicking the bot from every individual meeting. So, do you have any advice on how to fully disconnect these note takers once they've kind of attached to those accounts?
Not ethically. There are ways you can
Ethicals.
get rid of them, but I'm not going to.
Ethics is the topic of the day, after all.
Yeah, I'm not going to provide advice on how you could do that and get yourself into more crap than you probably really want to get into.
What a good ethical transcription assistant. That's what you want. That's what you want to hear, right?
Yeah. See,
It's a
now
good
the
servant of
unethical
ethics.
transcription assistant is going to listen to this over and over and over again and find ways to poke at Mike
Right.
for the next couple of weeks. But
Absolutely.
that's
Guaranteed.
because it's a good transcription assistant.
It's in the terms and conditions. Yeah, we offer.
But no, there are unfortunately a lot of times when somebody agrees to the end user license agreement and they don't actually read the license agreement because reading is overrated and most people here can't do it higher than a kindergarten level. It's all in there stating that you're giving it almost unfettered access to everything.
Yeah.
And in order for you to get it to go away, it takes almost an act of Congress. And by that, I mean it generally requires meeting at least once every 365 days, but it will probably not show up and then require it to be pushed to the next session of 365 days. So you're never getting rid of it. There's no way. The problem with that is now everybody else that is, within your organization is now being subjected to that AI note taker because you're unable to actually sit there and pay attention to a meeting. Let's be honest. These things came about because people are too lazy to actually pay attention to meetings. It's not because we said, oh, we really would love something to give us analytics around this. It's because people were too lazy to actually pay attention in meetings. They want to join. They want to do whatever it is that they're doing in the background. And they want to go and read over the key points once they're done because that way it takes less brain power. That's why you'll find that a lot of meetings, they won't allow you to have any of that tech. Like you were saying, high-level board meetings, they won't let you take your phone into the room. They don't want any chance that anything is Well, twofold. They don't want a chance anything is actually recorded that shouldn't be recorded, but they also want people to be present during the meeting.
Correct.
That's a huge thing. If you can't be present during a meeting, an AI note taker isn't going to help you,
Mm-hmm.
because by the time things are over, you're going to find in there you're reading through and saying, "Oh yeah, we talked about this. Oh crap! They asked if anybody had input on this." Well, guess what? The meeting's over. If you go in there now and you say, "Oh, I have input on this," they're going to say, "Well, what were you doing during the meeting that was so important you couldn't have provided your input?" So while it helps people to be lazy, it also kind of calls out the
Hinders them.
ones that aren't really doing what they're supposed to be doing in the first place. So, in a way it's beneficial, but it's mostly just a nightmare.
Yeah. And I want to provide both perspectives here. We're not here uh, demonizing note takers, rather just pointing out that, hey, there's a cost to account for, and a lot of people don't. They just blindly opt in and yes, yes,
Mm-hmm.
next, and they roll them in, and they think, oh, what harm could be done, right? It's looked at very innocently, very much like IoT, very much like IoT,
Yeah.
as far as oh, it's an Echo Dot. What harm could be done? Oh, it's a Google Nest. It's a da 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 da. Right now, it's like, right. Now your thermostat's tracking your GPS on your phone, but it's nice because it turns my AC on right when I get home. I was like,
Hey,
turn your own
my
AC on when you get home,
my
right? Like,
toaster was laughing at me the other day, and I
that's
had
right.
no idea why.
That's
So
right.
now I think I understand a little bit more.
Well, it's funny. Yeah, the reason our kitchen appliances are scheming against us is they hear us talk about dieting so often, but we always come back. They're like, if only
Yeah,
our
it
fridge would
hears me
look at
talk
us
about dieting, and
when
then I
it's
pop
2
in a
a.m.
toaster
and be
strudel,
like,
and it's
I don't
like,
know if that's the best choice, man. Can imagine the
exactly.
Jetsons vibes in the future. But so no, I just want to point out that there are I think very well executed uses of AI note taking tools. One example that we had is if we are just passing word from higher headquarters to a group of engineers, and we have that sync at 3 or 4 p.m. in the afternoon, and we staff engineers 24/7. We can't expect people that are
Mm-hmm.
up all night to be there in the afternoon. So we use meeting notes in order to pass those, what company holidays are coming up? What do you need to do to enroll into benefits? Is there online training or in-person training you need to take as a part of annual HR stuff? All of those things, right? They're not, teetering so far into the privileged information side of house. Now, if we're talking about an IR, we're talking about a security incident, often a separate bridge, a little bit more secure, is spun up. But if it's informational, like, hey, this holiday's coming up, we got a 3-day weekend, this kind of stuff. Right now, what we do is we have a really elegant way of sharing those meeting notes with overnight staff or staff not on deck, or you're out sick or whatever, without having to go back and listen to the entire meeting. And there's efficiency there. There's 100% efficiency there. The second is for training. So if you're going through a training and you're doing a live demonstration, or you're bringing a team up to speed on a new tool or a new platform, there was one training that I wasn't able to physically attend, but they were able to record it and transcribe it. And so the nice thing is I was able to go in after the fact and get caught up to speed, rather than obviously the operational inefficiency is we got to hold 2 to 3 trainings and hope that everybody can find a spot in one of those slots, right? And so I think from an organizational standpoint, from an efficiency standpoint, there is cases for it.
Yeah.
Where it starts to get difficult is often, one, is it used as an excuse for laziness, if we're just honest, right? At the executive level, at the level 1 engineer, level 1 employee level. Two, and Matt brought this point up, is it maybe a symptom of us doing too much? If we really can't be present for that meeting to intake what's happening for 30 to 45 or maybe more minutes, maybe don't have the meeting that day, or maybe look at lightening your calendar a little bit. And it's going to be very anti-Western construct type of idea there. I know, right? Do less but do it better. But there is a case to be made, at least from a thought-provoking angle, of if you really depend on a note-taking application to get you through your day, maybe you're overtapped. Maybe you got to delegate more rather than hoard. And there are some, again, entrepreneurial insights there for those willing to bend the ear and listen. But again, I think there are good ethical uses of these tools. The point of the topic today, and the reason why we're live streaming and talking about it, is primarily the widespread abuse of these tools. Sometimes knowingly, but more often than not unknowingly. And again, in safety brief fashion, we come with educational insights that try to shed a little bit of light on this topic. But by far, the biggest, most pressing matter of this is the ethics piece and consent, right? If you're using these meeting apps and you are not, number one, explicitly receiving consent from individuals on those meetings or attending those meetings, as well as providing the option to opt out, right? It's not a,
Mm-hmm.
hey, are you okay with this? In that same vein, it's, hey, are you okay with this? If you would like to opt out, you most certainly can. And there's a big difference between just the notification or the informing of it and the consent piece, right? Like, hey, Elizabeth, I walk up to your desk. Can I borrow your pen? Takes pen, right? Before the yes is given, right? It's like you can't just inform people of what's about to happen. You do, yes, you can borrow my pen. And again, I use very silly, trivial examples because it's really that simple, right?
Mm-hmm.
And but if you need it, that's fine. I can go find another pen, right? I've given Elizabeth the out, I've given Matt the out, whoever it is I'm hoarding pens from because I don't bring my own pens to work. Uh, that's the point, right? It's the informed, explicit consent and the clear provisioning of an opt out. And if you're doing those two things from an ethics perspective, I'd say, without being legal advice or legal counsel, which we are not, you're in green pastures there as far as that's concerned. But if you're not, you got to ask yourself why.
I know, I completely agree. And again, it's something we bring up quite often, and that's convenience should never outweigh security. So, well, thank you both for those amazing insights today. That's all the time we have. Just remember, AI note takers may seem helpful, but if they're showing up uninvited or operating without full transparency, they're not assistants, they're infiltrators. Stay vigilant, review your permissions, and always know who or what is in the room with you. Thank you for tuning in, and we hope to see you next week on the Safety Brief.
Thanks all.